C7th. So what I'm doing is making a C, and instead of a 7th, I'm taking my first finger, my pinky rather, and putting it on the 3rd fret of the 1st string. So instead of a C7, I'm doing this. It's just kind of a different, kind of a C. I'm not even sure what that is, but that's what the song is doing. So he does this. I got ahead of myself. Let's just stick with the C. So do this. One thing really important in learning this kind of guitar, get the idea that your thumb and your fingers are not operating separately. What I mean by that is your thumb is not playing by itself and your fingers are doing something totally different. They're working together. And I call these pinches. And once I understood this really skyrocketed me along with learning this kind of guitar. I was really having trouble because I was trying to do two things separately. I had this idea that the thumb and the finger were playing two separate things. They're working together. And what I mean by that is you get a lot of pinches. So when I hit the bass note on that G, I'm pinching. So I'm pinching with my first finger and my thumb. Pinch. Pinch. Pinch, 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 pinch. Constantly you're picking, like it's kind of a pinching movement. Almost like a beetle with the pincher thingies on the end. Think of that and then try to identify the places in the song where the pinches take place, and then you'll, that's not very musically sophisticated, but that's how I get it. So the song, again, let's start off. So a lot of the C, you're just thumping the bass and muting it with your right hand palm. And in between, you're picking with your first finger, with your pinky on the 3rd fret of the 1st string, and just letting it ring. And then the next part of the song, let me just play it for you, then I'll show you. This is pretty simple. It goes. So what he's doing is playing the G, and then he's going to a D7. So the D7th chord, and I'm picking, you know, you think a D7th, you're going to pick the open 4th string, which you can do. And musically you think that's what I should do. But with this style of guitar, sometimes you can thump the bass, and as long as you have it muted, it doesn't really matter which string you pick. So I can still hit the open A while I'm playing a D. And I'm still getting that thumping sound, but it's really not in any particular key, and it works. Big Bill Bernsey, if you get into his music, he does that quite a bit, where he's thumping on a bass. It's not even part of that chord, but it still sounds okay because he's got it muted. So that's what I'm doing here. So with the D7th, then he goes back to the G. So that little riff that he does, he's just switching chords. So it's like this. You got to listen to the song to get where it's at. So let me play the whole song from this point on, from the beginning to this point. Now we go to an A7, and we got an A7th chord, and our thumping string is the open 5th string. He just does that very briefly. So our chord progression is G, C, and D, but we're also putting in an A7. And that is what's called the 2 chord. So this is a chord that works in that progression G, C, and D, and later we'll talk about why. Musically, you could study this, but right now, just trust me, A7. Then we're going to go to a D7, to a G. And to start out here, I'm going to show you a simple turnaround, which is an easy way to take the song from the first verse to the second verse. These are called turnarounds. And eventually you'll learn this. I'm going to show you that here in a little bit. But to start out with, you can do something like this. Just a simple chord turnaround that you could use in this song. It works, but it's just for a beginner if you're not ready for the turnarounds, which I'll show you here in a minute. So the whole song is real simple. I'm going to call out the chords and what I'm doing here. So we start out with a G. I'm going to stop here. I made a mistake teaching the song. I didn't play that first. I stopped the first chord too soon. It's like this. Again. And then to the 7th. C. C. G. D7. A7, D7, G, D7, G. So there's a very simple song. It's a cool song. And you're just working on thumping the bass. While picking the chords with your first finger. First finger. Second verse. Now for the more ambitious player here, once you get the hang of that, the turnarounds. Turnaround and the introduction, which are kind of cool. Little cool licks. That's called a guitar lick when you play single string runs or couple strings together, which are called double stops. And one place you use these little licks a lot of times are when you get at the end of one verse heading into another one. These are called turnarounds. So in Love in Vain, he does this really cool, typical country blues turnaround in the key of G. So let me play it for you one time. Do it again. What I'm doing is I'm basically making a G chord, and I'm keeping my pinky on the 3rd fret of the 1st string, and then I'm taking my ring finger on the 3rd fret of the 4th string, and I'm pinching them. My first finger is playing a little different. It's going the whole time. It keeps picking continuously, and then my thumb is sort of gradually walking the bass up from here. And you end up with an open 4th string, because that'll be on the D chord. So like this. Then we play the D7. Then we go to the G to start the song again. Next verse. Play it all the way through. Johnson's Love in Vain. Now there's one more little trick I'm going to show you. But that is basically the song. And that is a good beginner song to start working on thumping those chords. It's a nice slow song. It's not too fast. You're using 4 different chords, so you get some good chord practice. And I'll show you another song here in a little bit where we throw in a couple more chords, or at least one more chord for you. But that is a very simple starter song. And another trick, at the beginning of the song, he does an introduction, which is kind of cool. And I'm going to introduce you to the double stop. And he does something like this. And then he goes to this turnaround. That's how he starts the song. So he's doing this without a bass as far as I can hear. What I do is I have my first finger on the 10th fret. So you got to count 10 frets on the first string. And I've got my ring finger, my 3rd finger, on the 12th fret of the 2nd string. And I play them together, I should have this. And that is a G. Listen carefully. G, G. So that's a double stop, and it's in G. And I'm picking, again, with my first finger, all upstrokes, getting both the 1st and 2nd string. So in the song, he does something like this. So it goes. Like this. So he's just taking it, moving everything down, 1 fret, another fret, and then he's winding up with his first finger on the 7th fret of the 1st string, and then he takes his 2nd finger on the 8th fret of the 2nd string. And this is also a G. Hear that? That's a G. That's a G. That's a G. So you got this to start out. And then into the song. So this is something cool to practice. So you start out with this. And you make a G, but not the whole chord. You start out, I would put my pinky on the 1st string, 3rd fret, and then take your ring finger right away on the 4th fret, 3rd fret of the 4th string. And just get right into this. If you want to hear exactly how Robert Johnson does it, that's pretty close, but a little bit off. I'm not listening to the original tune doing this. I'm just doing this from memory. So you've got to do the 2 together. If you're going to sing the song, you start first verse right there. I'm hoping this isn't too much for you. Let me know if this is too hard. I'm trying to get you started playing a song and using the chords and starting to learn some bass approaches. Monotonic bass, if you want some more practice with this, I have a separate video on beginner's monotonic bass, which might help you with this as well. Or you can just use the context of this song and just work on that. Switching the chords in this song and keeping that bass going. That bass should be steady. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2. Shouldn't stop. It should just be constant throughout the song. Whereas the first finger is going to let up every now and then and just kind of leave some space there. Listen to Robert Johnson's original. Take this lesson, put the 2 together, and practice, practice, practice. I'll be back with another simple acoustic lesson for monotonic bass to get you started. And we'll also eventually do a couple lessons with what's called alternating bass, which is a little more complicated, but yet, if you're going to learn this kind of guitar, you gotta get started sometime. See you again soon. Hope you like this lesson.